here or there, that doesn't negate all the other studies that there is. And two, I would say that even like consensual sex work is different than human trafficking. Me being
they did a quantitative they did a quantitative analysis.
Okay.
They took a ton of different studies in order to make these types of comparisons. That's one. But two, the entailment here is that even, let's just say, even if there was less human trafficking by the legalization of the prostitution than the decriminalization of the prostitution, if I want zero prostitution and there's no entailment of any trafficking by me doing that, how's that not a better outcome for society, Jazmen?
Wait, what? Can you repeat your question?
Yes. If there's an entailment of human trafficking, regardless of the...
Wilson is back to debate this Jazmen Jafar. Jazmen Jafar, no stranger to my channel. I've covered her doing debates before, usually in defense of her doing OF, making adult content online. And Andrew Wilson completely owns her in this debate, as you will see. Let's see Andrew Wilson debate Jazmen Jafar.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I don't think that rights are rights if they just, my point isn't that we should only have rights when they have no harm. Most of the rights that we have some harm associated with it, but that freedom, and our country is founded on freedom, and it instead of religious dogma, is what outweighs that. So for instance, freedom of speech.
Who cares what the country's founded on?
No.
We're having an argument.
Still matters,
just
even though people can say mean things.
Right?
I
want to know.
You like your freedom to gun. Well, you said I could have a while to respond. You just went on this wild.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Go ahead. That's fair.
10 seconds. And then you also say, like, so for instance, I assume you really like your right to own guns. Well, guns also harm people. Now, I believe in your right to the Second Amendment. And I believe that you having that right outweighs that your whatever harm that guns bring about, at least when it comes to generally the ownership of guns. I think Andrew's main thing is that he believes that because he believes in an objective morality, which even that, the only reason you believe that your God is better than other gods is only because of your subjective beliefs. At the end of the day, your morality is pretty much just as subjective as mine. The only reason someone would choose one religious morality over another is they feel that they has a better moral framework for objective truth. If you think Christianity has a better moral framework than Islam, you need a moral basis on which to judge that. And it can't be the religion itself.
Wait, let's let her.
I just want to correct this so that she understands. I've granted this worldview is true. I'm assuming that I came to the Christian ethics that I have under a secularist purview, meaning that I'm not saying that it's based on a God or anything else. I'm agreeing with you. I came to it completely subjectively. Why am I wrong and you're right?
So, but the framework you want to hold up is Christian. You want it to be
but I came to it
to be a theocracy.
Right. So that's why I need to explain this to you, right? Assume that I came to the same exact worldview that I hold right now, just absent God through secularism. So I reject your notion of rights and I reject your notion of entitlements. I reject your notion of everything. Okay. But I'm not basing anything on God. I'm basing it purely off of a subjective standard for the purpose of this thought experiment, meaning I came to all of these views through a secular ethos. Why am I wrong and you're right?
I would say you're wrong and I'm right, because at least in this country, your worldview wants to alter our history, our values, our national identity. I just gave you some reasons that secular countries tend to fare off worse than countries that are run by a religious doctrine as the law of the land. And I think America, one of the reasons.
I think you're trying to say better, right? Not worse.
Yeah. Sorry if I misspoke, but I would say that, like, if you don't like America, if you don't like the freedoms that we have here, that's okay.
Right? Then get out. If you don't like it,
I mean, honestly, yeah, I'm really proud to live here. So if you're basically saying that America's freedoms that they grant us are bad, and I'm saying when I look at the world and I look at what freedoms other people don't have, like the countries my parents came from, while we have those rights here, I look at this as a good. And I'm happy to live here.
Yeah.
If you prefer to live there, I think that's true.
So hang on, let's back up, because you're not actually responding to this. I'm gonna tell it to you again. I'm assuming for a second in this hypothetical that I have come to the worldview that I hold absent a God, meaning it's just purely secular in nature. Okay. And I hold all the same values I do, but I don't base any of them on some murderousness sky daddy, as you would put it, right? Why would those values be wrong and your values would be right if we're both subjectivists?
I mean, I'm not saying that your views are objectively wrong and mine are objectively
Then
right.
if my views are not objectively wrong, then me advocating for Christian nationalism and completely repealing everything in the United States to make it format around Christian values under a secular purview would be fine.
So yeah, if you want to sit here on the internet and argue with a porn star about a revolution that you want to have on the internet, go for it. Good luck, right?
So
Our
you're
Constitution
conceding,
has lasted this long for a reason.
so
I
you're
just
conceding.
gave you. I'm saying that you don't have an objective morality and I don't have an objective morality.
You're right.
So we're
So
on the
if,
same footing.
So if it's true that we're just both coming at this from two different subjective worldviews, and you claim that mine is just as valid as yours, what is your argument for why it is that I should not impose my version of this on society and should instead yield to yours?
I'm not saying you shouldn't. You can advocate for it. That's what freedom of speech is. You can sit on the internet, you can have your channel, you can advocate for it. But our Constitution and our branches of government are this way, and they've been this way for a while. Now, there's little differences. Supreme Court may interpret the First Amendment in different ways. But if you want to get rid of the First Amendment, if you want to get rid of our entire country, America as it is, you have the right to try to sit there and convince people to do that. Go for
and
it. I don't have a problem with that. I just think it would be a bad idea. And the reason I think it would be a bad idea.
I don't have a problem with that. You're saying it's not immoral to do, so you have no objection to people doing it.
I have no objection to people trying to, I think just like our founding fathers decided to make this country based off reason, debate, winning in the marketplace of ideas. I do think that's the way to do that. So if you want to have a revolution with guns and overthrow people, I don't think that's good.
She's not understanding the question. It's very simple what he's saying. What Andrew wants her to do is tell her why his worldview is wrong. Meaning, like, if he wants to do away with, adult films, why is that wrong to do? Why would it be wrong to get rid of adult films? Just purely on it. Why is it okay that she wants to keep it around, but why is it okay? Like, pretty much he wants her to argue the morality of each. And that's why he concedes these things. That's why he says, okay, fine. Let's just assume I came to this. This is a subjective point of view. I came to this, in a secularist way. Why am I wrong and you're right? It's pretty simple. And she can't seem to understand or answer that.
But I can't sit here and stop you from trying to do it unless you're doing something, illegal, and then, the powers that be.
So then you have no moral objection to it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And if we did end up, hang on, stop. Let me finish. So since you have no moral objection to this, since you have no argument against this, since you don't think that it's wrong for Christian nationalists to advocate for this, since you don't think it's wrong for us to go ahead and reform the entire nation under whatever purview that we want, what in the world is your argument to keep the status quo then?
Because I just told you, when you look at secular countries in the world today, one, I love America. I think our freedoms are great. And that's based on my subjective worldview, but so is yours. You just admit it. So if yours is subjective and mine is subjective, but mine is also the status quo, and it seems to have better outcomes on every measure you can. When we look at other countries who are not secular, on infant mortality, life expectancy, educational achievement, economic prosperity, freedom, when we're looking at murder rates, crime rates, the American model has worked. And so if you want to come in, the burden of proof is on you. You're the one that wants to get rid of the status quo. You want to get rid of our freedoms. So you have to explain to me why yours also subjective worldview.
There can't be a burden of proof placed on me to prove something which you've already declared is not immoral and not problematic from your purview. What burden of proof should I bring to the table? You've already said this. You've already said this, but if we're going to go, so I'm going to kind of go ahead into your worldview a little bit more just to humor you, because you're saying, okay, I guess the one objection that I could find is that you think that the outcomes are worse. This is kind of what you're saying.
Yes. And also I believe your subjective moral framework, obviously, it doesn't align with my also subjective moral framework. So ours are both subjective. If you want to start claiming yours is objective, we can get into that.
Okay, so let's go. We can go off of the consequences.
But you're the one that wants to eliminate our entire history, our national identity, get rid of America as it is. So I would love to hear your argument as to why. I would love to hear because you have no objection. Argument as to why is just that I don't have an objective moral framework.
But you have no objection. You said I have no objection to this. So there is no argument.
I have an objection. I don't think that I have a objective moral objection. That's what I'm
I
saying.
think what
But I
she's
have
saying,
an
she has
objection
an
to you
outcome.
taking.
Wait, just let me really quickly clarify. I think what she's saying, she has an objection from an outcomes-based perspective, from a
Right. So I'll grant that too. I'll grant the outcomes just to
And
kind
I
of
would
further
also
it.
add, Alex,
I just
that
want to
it's
let you
also
know
an
that
objection based on my subjective
personal
moral framework.
preferences.
I'd also
Right, I
have an
get it.
objection there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I get it. It's your preferences, this type of thing. I just want to let you know that the debate was already over before we began because you have no moral
And if you say
reason,
it just
no
makes it
moral
true, for
reason
sure.
to claim. You have no moral,
Neither do
absolutely
you.
not one. Yeah, but that's my
Neither do
point.
you.
That's my point. My point is to say, if
So it's
I
a
have
draw. So I
it,
just want to know how you
no,
win.
stop. I'm going to explain.
Tell me how you win.
I'm going to
If neither of
explain.
us have an
You have to
objective
stop
moral
talking
framework,
for
and
long
that
enough
is
for me
what
to
wins
explain
the
it.
debate, you got to answer the question.
A lot of people in my comments will bring that up. Well, Andrew Wilson's coming at this from it's just all about his preferences as well. Yeah, obviously. That's not the point. The point is, how are his preferences better or worse than this person's preferences? Because objectively, he's arguing, well, let's get rid of, like I said, I think this is about, I believe this topic is about whether or not we should get rid of, yeah, that's the whole point. He wants her to explain how are her preferences better than his preferences, meaning
You
because
win
if
we're on the same footing.
I'm going to tell you why. Because if we
Okay, go.
stalemate the board and you say your worldview is just as valid as my worldview is, and that means that you can't have any objection to my advocation for any of the things that I advocate for, period. Even if what I'm advocating for is a theocracy. That's why. Now, that aside,
Okay.
I'm still willing to grant the worldview for the sake of argument, for the consequences. Let's start with this. Who is Leonid Radvinsky? Do you know who that is?
I don't know who that is, but I want to go back because I'm not done with the other part of the
I
conversation.
want to let you know that Leonid. No, you want to
We're
move
not
back to
done
this
with
and
the
do a
other part
circle
of the
again?
conversation.
Okay,
No, we're not done. You can't just move on when I haven't had a chance to respond to you. If you would like to move on, I'll just go back to this and you can, it's just going to make the debate longer than it has to be.
Go ahead.
You are literally what is a walking incorrect LSAT question, except it's too incorrect and too easy. It would be a layup LSAT question that nobody going to a first year law school would even get wrong, which is like, oh, you can't prove your subjective moral framework is right. Therefore, I automatically win. And the question would be, what's wrong with Andrew's argument? It's wrong because just because I can't prove my moral framework, but you also can't prove yours, doesn't mean yours is right. At best, it means it's a draw. So tell me how you win under that metric.
I'm going to tell you why. Because if I come to the exact same ethical system and foundations that I have right now, right this second, those ethical frame systems say to eradicate and eliminate all of your ethical framework. It says to me to do everything that I can possibly do to destroy the degeneracy that you propose for society by any means necessary, essentially. And because you have no objection to doing that, you can't actually object to me doing that.
No, because I don't have a philosophical objection that's grounded in objective morality. That doesn't mean that I don't have any objection at all. And you still didn't answer the question. If yours is subjective and mine is subjective, how did you win the debate about Christian nationalism being better than secularism? How did you meet that?
Well, so what we're looking at here, we're trying to look at the framework and say, if we're going to look for society, okay, and what are going to be the goals and kind of the outcomes for society that we want, we have to kind of start with what our foundation is going to be. So as we started, you said that the foundation that I have is just as valid as the foundation that you have. Under the purview, yes, but now
you
hang
don't
on.
have a better philosophical
if you will
framework.
stop, I'll explain the rest of it. The flip side to the coin now is I can say this, but because I'm a theist and I do believe in objective morality, right? Even though I granted your worldview for the sake of argument, I have a divine command to destroy everything that you would consider that you hold dear, right? And you, though, have no objection to that.
I would argue yours is also subjective. You picked that moral framework because you felt that it was better. That's also just your subjective opinion, right? And then if you want to get into, we can get super philosophical into Hume's. Can you get an ought from an is? Why should it, we could go into a whole God debate if you like. But my point is, just because you get yours from a monster in the sky, and you chose subjectively based on your feelings, just like I base my moral preference.
So again, like sometimes when I watch these debates, I look for the sneaky language that you could tell with a place where they're coming from. Notice how she referred to God as a monster in the sky. But notice that like sneaky little, it already shows you the place that she's coming from and exactly why she wants to go against God. Because she is against God. She refers to him as a monster.
It was your feeling that chose your sect of Christianity when your interpretation of divine command, which by the way, does not even match most of the other people in your religion. I got a bunch of messages from Christians late after our last discussion about you saying you would institute breeding facilities based on divine command to force people to have children. They were like, I don't know what kind of Christianity that is. That's not my divine command. So one, divine command is highly subjective.
You mean within the purview of a hypothetical?
Because it depends on every single person's interpretation of the divine command.
So,
and it's just ultimately based on your feelings as well. And you can't even prove it.
We can grant all of this. Listen, we can still grant all of this and still move into the worldview. And even under your secular worldview of just outcomes based, right? You just are looking at outcomes. I can still demonstrate that the society that I want has better outcomes than the society you want, thus forcing you to concede to my worldview as well. Let's go through it.
Let's get there. No. Let's get there. But I'm not letting you go on this point because you said the debate is over just because I have a subjective worldview.
Well,
and
you don't know it yet, but you're going to find out.
You're about to find out. Yours is subjective too. So tell me how that makes you win the debate, because that was your claim. And I'm going to push you on this claim until you give me an answer about how
I've already
that
given it to you 15 times because once we have had you concede that every form of morality is essentially the same and as valid as any other form of morality, and you have no objection to any of it, then if I come in and say, well, I feel like I have a divine command to destroy everything that you hold dear, you have no moral objection to that and have to consider stop. I just listened to all your spiel. Stop. It's my turn. Stop talking.
You're not answering
my turn.
Question.
I'm answering it. I literally could not be answering it more concisely than this. So now I can say to you, and am saying to you, that under what I consider divine command, if I come in and say, under divine command, I have to destroy everything that you hold dear, you actually have no moral objection to me doing that. Do you understand?
And your moral objection is based on nothing, your subjective preferences as well. So that would mean it's a...
She just really not understanding. Is this woman so dense that she doesn't understand what he's trying to say? And that's how you know this like secular, like humanism type of stuff. It's all nonsense because it's like no matter who he debates on this stuff, no matter who he debates, an OF girl, Diddley Donger, Matt Dillahunty, like it doesn't matter. Like all ranges of intelligence and backgrounds, whoever argues on that side, it seems like a losing argument. Andrew Wilson gets down to like the basics. The fundamental is just, well, basically, if you feel that there is no morality that's better than others, then you should technically have no problem if I wanted to impose my morality.
So if you believe in divine command,
keep saying mine is subjective.
There's no evidence for your divine command, and your divine command is also highly subjective. And then you go, well, since you can't prove yours because you don't get your advice from the same sky friend I get it from, now you lose. You still have the burden of proof to show why your moral framework is right.
Right. So then that would mean...
The only way you can beat me is if your moral framework is right. So I'd like
What's the logical entailment? The logical entailment would then be, if that's the case, then all we're really talking about again is force, right?
And all the force is on my side. So cool, then I will.
Well, this is interesting. Let's move into this, right? So if that's a determination, you can say whatever you want, doesn't matter. You're just kind of talking, you're not saying anything.
No, because you made a claim and I'm pushing you on the logic of the claim and the burden of proof, right? Because just because I can't prove my moral framework, which I concede, the only difference between you and me is I'm conceding that mine's subjective and you're not.
Yeah, but I already granted that for the sake of... I literally granted it for the sake of argument. I granted it for the sake of argument.
Then you said that actually you win, and you win on a basis where you didn't grant it for the sake of argument.
Right, because what you're saying is that, well, because if I flip the coin and say, okay, then all I have to do is demonstrate from there that I believe in divine command and objective morality. Now I have a claim of which I can destroy your claim with, because yours is just everything. Stop talking, Jasmine. Stop talking. Let me finish. So again, what ends up happening is this. Once it's flipped, now you can see that all claims that you make are just as subjective as all other claims, and you believe that all of them are just as valid. The distinction is you could be one of these types of atheists who believes that all claims are not equally moral and that all claims are not equally valid. But you, in your stupidity, actually made the bold claim that they're all equal to all other claims. So if that's true, then any fucking thing that I want to do, you can't have an objection to. Doesn't matter what it is.
That's not how logic works. And if we're going to go with the philosophical sophistication that you're at, then I will take the Sam Harris well-being view. The only reason I don't take that is because there are still philosophical premises that aren't met. But where you're arguing from, especially when you say that because I have a quote-unquote objective world, but you didn't grant it, and the debate is already over somehow because yours is subjective and mine is also subjective, at least for the sake of argument. But now that the argument's over, mine's actually not subjective, and I'm telling you that yours is. You now have to prove. You have the burden of proof
because you've already validated that my worldview. You've already validated my worldview is just as good as yours. That's why.
I didn't. What I'm saying is you said it's not, though. You have the burden of proof. So
what do you mean? I'm not saying I already granted it. I already granted it. I already granted it, and you say it's just as valid.
You granted it just to take it back to make
an argument. So then if it's just as valid, as your worldview, what's your objection to it?
I'm saying it's a draw then, because if our moral, you're saying it's not a draw because it's just as valid. That's not how burden of proof works. This is like logical reasoning.
I just want you to concede that it's just as valid as your worldview.
If you concede that either your subjective framework is, you have a subjective framework too, or you prove that yours is somehow objective, then you have to concede as well that we're at the same level. You're not at a point above me.
Yeah, so for the point of the argument, I've already done that. For the point of the argument, I just said I'll go ahead and grant it, right, for the sake of the argument. But now I just need you to say that both of our worldviews are equal to each other in your mind.
I don't believe in an objective moral framework. I believe yours is subjective and mine is subjective, and you wanted to grant that, but then say you won by not granting it. And if you're going to do that, then you have to prove why yours is objective. If we're starting,
I didn't say anything about objective morality. One more time.
At the basis of philosophical
why are you not understanding this?
Framework.
Stop. Why are you not understanding this? I've already granted it. I came to the ethical purview that I have all by myself, sees. Okay, has nothing to do with. Stop, Jazmen. Let me finish, Jazmen. Stop talking. Okay. So if I came to this all by my lonesome, absent a murderousness God, okay, and you claim that these are equally valid, I just need the concession that you believe that the Christian nationalist worldview is just as valid as your worldview. That's it. That's all I'm asking.
If you concede that you did not already win the debate, then because how would
you? Oh my gosh, she is unbearable. She's so stuck on, well, can you concede that you didn't win? Like, she's so stuck on it. It's like, oh my gosh, she must be a pain in the rear to deal with in real life. Like, imagine getting into an argument with this girl.
Debate
whatever concession yet you want. I'll go ahead and make that. But you will concede that mine is just as good as yours, right?
Andrew, just for clarification, do you mean? Well, let me actually clarify. Andrew, when you say that, do you mean just morally, or do you mean from a utilitarian perspective too?
What do you mean? From a moral standpoint, there's nothing immoral about what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
There's nothing objectively immoral, I would say, because it's really hard to ground.
So then let's move into what the subjective immorality is.
So there's there's nothing objectively wrong with what he wants to do. Okay, so Andrew's absolutely right. The debate's over. Like, if there's no something objectively wrong with what he wants, then the debate's over. Then this debate's just going to turn into my preferences then. Now it's going to be about subjectively, which is, my preference. You might not be objectively wrong, but my fifis say that you're wrong.
Sure.
So what would be subjectively immoral about what I'm proposing?
Well, if we're going based on my moral preferences, I think that a lot of outside of the fact that there's no evidence for it, a lot of the policies you purport to believe in, such as in our last discussion, instituting breeding facilities, if 80% of women, you said that if 80% of women were dying during childbirth, that you still believe that they should be forced to have children in breeding facilities if necessary. I believe that is based on my moral preferences, which based on your moral preferences that you pretend come from divine command, even though most other believers don't even think that that's what divine command would say. I would say that that's bad for society. I would say that sacrificing 80% of our women so that we can have babies for whatever reason, so that the future generations can flourish, is bad based on my subjective moral preferences. I also think when you look at the data and you look at the difference between outcomes in secular countries versus our country, that is also, in my subjective opinion, shows that it's worse, but also objective measures of outcome also show that it's worse. Lastly, I would say that our freedoms, as I love America and I love the freedoms that we have, that could be a subjective opinion. If you want to take those freedoms away, I don't think you're just going to have issues from me. I think you're going to have issues from a lot of people, because if you to destroy America, which is basically what you're saying you want to do. You want to destroy the foundation of it. You want to take away what our founding fathers have built. You want to take away our Constitution, essentially, to institute your subjective worldview. I need you to make an argument for why that should be the case, especially when you have no enforcement. And if you think rights come from enforcement, at the moment, you have nothing. All you have is words and a degenerate porn star that you're arguing with on the internet.
Yeah.
She keeps flip-flopping back and forth. So she wants to argue this from a subjective point of view, but then she brings up data and studies and stuff. Well, wait a minute. Well, that's dealing with the objective then. So, and then even when she's talking about the objective, she then says my preferences. So, I don't know, man.
So, okay, can I move into these points now? Is that okay, or are you gonna like kind of overwindedly say nothing again? So first and foremost,
I wasn't saying nothing.
As we move into the hypothetical, you say that from your subjective worldview of your own personal preferences that I'm wrong.
Just like from your subjective worldview of your preferences, I'm wrong.
Before
so again,
you do an internal critique, answer my question, please.
No, yes. So we're at a draw. That's the answer.
Okay, so the answer, the answer would be yes or no. So are you saying that I'm wrong, that I would put 80% of women rather than have the entire population of the world go extinct?
But not in an objective moral way. And you don't have one either.
Okay,
so again, if you want to go back into this topic,
I just need you to answer the question. That's it. I don't need you to give me additional bloviating.
I answered the question.
Appreciate if you would just say yes or no, and I'll do the same for you.
Re-ask the question, please.
So just answer yes or no, please. So you're saying, and I want to make sure I get this correct, that from your subjective preferences inside of a hypothetical where it's either the world is going to go extinct or I have to force women to have children, that me forcing them to have children rather than allow the human race to go extinct, that's immoral. That's wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So all of humanity operate off of the subjective preferences of Jazmen Jafar?
No, just like they shouldn't operate off.
So who should they operate off of?
I think that's why we have checks and balances. We have a system that we've created with representation. We have 3 branches of government, and we have a constitution that has made this one of the greatest countries on earth. That is a secular constitution that takes freedoms and takes God completely out of it. Our founding fathers did for a reason.
What are we appealing to for whose morality we're going to use, Jazmen?
Well, you're wanting to change the status quo,
Who
right?
are we appealing to, Jazmen, for our morality? Jazmen, answer my question, Jazmen.
Who are you appealing to? I think we're appealing to.
Let's just say I'm appealing to myself for the purpose of the conversation. Okay. I'll just say I'm appealing to myself. Who are you appealing to yourself?
I'm appealing to myself, our institutions, and the best minds in the world, having reasoned, debated the scientific method, empirical evidence. That's who I'm.
Man, secular human, same exact arguments that the other people Andrew's debated has made. The same thing, like, oh, the best minds coming together and we all make a decision together because all the smartest minds, they never make mistakes and they know what's best. Like, it's amazing. Like I said earlier, losing argument. No one, no matter how stupid or smart they are, can make a good argument for secular humanism. Again, it's like communism. Well, that's not real communism. Like every time they try communism and it fails horribly, and then people look back and go, well, that wasn't real communism. And then they try it again and it failed. And it just like, it just seems like communism doesn't work. Same thing with the secular humanism.
So that's who I'm appealing to. Now I want you to tell me who you're appealing to, since I answered your question.
I've already, again, right? I'm still inside of your worldview. Happily, I'll just say appealing to me. So if I'm appealing to me and you're appealing to you, who the fuck do we go with?
Me, because I have all the enforcement, which you love, and I have all the institutions on my side. So if you want to change the status quo, you have a lot more work than I do. When I'm saying, hey, I love the foundation of our country, it's good. So I would love for you to give some arguments as to why you want to destroy America for your.
Well, you don't understand. I'm actually giving you the arguments. You don't even know I am. So ultimately, what you're saying what it boils down to is might makes right in your worldview.
No, I was appealing to your worldview. I'm saying that what wins in the marketplace of ideas, now, sometimes that's not what I agree with. Sometimes I disagree with the decisions the Supreme Court makes. Sometimes I make those disagreements, but we have a social contract when we live in this country, and I don't think you're violating it by advocating for your position. Now, if you want to take guns and start shooting people, I don't think that's you.
This does
but
not answer
sometimes
to the question at all. If you have a subjective set of stated preferences and appeal to yourself for what is moral, and I do the same and appeal to myself for what is moral, what is the threshold breaker for how we are going to make the determination of what we're going to do, Jazmen?
I think then at that point, because we're two single individuals, then we look at the framework we already exist in and the foundation of the country we already exist in. And the foundation of the country we already exist in, America, which a lot of people
what
are
if the
proud
foundation of the country
for
is that we march people up on top of a pyramid and we cut their heart out and we sacrifice it to the sun god, Jazmen?
That is, subjectively, I would think that's wrong. Now, one of the reasons, like I said in my
How
opening,
would you
I'm
know
proud
that
to live
was
in this
wrong? You
country.
said that's the threshold breaker. The threshold breaker is to look at your institutions and to look at your society.
No,
and that's
I
the
said the threshold breaker
for what's
for
moral.
this debate. The threshold breaker for this debate. The threshold
For this
breaker
debate.
for moral framework. For moral framework.
For the
on which
purpose of
moral
this
framework is
debate, you
correct.
said the
There is
threshold breaker.
There is, if we're going, no, I would, because the debate is which one's better for society. So I was taking it by that question. If we're just going to go which one's right morally, then it's a draw. There is no
I'm
right.
asking
There's
you,
no right for you
I'm
either.
asking you this question again. One more time, since you just avoid it like the plague.
I feel like I've answered it.
If you're claiming, you make the claim, hey, all of my morals come from my own subjective preferences and nothing else, and so do yours. And I say, okay, I'll grant that and agree with it. We have an argument about what we should do with society. How do we make the determination as to which ones we go with, Jazmen?
Okay, well then, like I said, then I think we should go to outcomes. And I just demonstrated, I have a huge paper here, I can send it to you, on all of the outcomes that are better in a secular nation over a nation that isn't secular. The second thing I say we would do is we would look at the people and what they want. In our country, in the United States of America, we value the Constitution.
I just need to clarify a couple things. So if we're going to go with outcomes, right? Outcomes are what we're going to move to in order to
That's not the only thing.
What is the other thing?
Give you others. I said outcomes, and we also need to look at what the people, like what the marketplace of ideas, that's why we have freedom of speech in this, because then it allows someone like you who wants to topple America to tell me why you want to topple something that's so valuable to the vast majority of people in this country.
Yeah,
so
but that would be outcomes again. That would be outcomes again.
If it's outcomes again, then it's outcomes again. But there's also, I think,
if it's just outcomes, so outcomes are what we're looking at.
It's not just outcomes.
Then why would you value it? Then why would you value it?
The people in this country, most of them share the same subjective preference that I have about the importance of the freedoms that we share, and they love America for those freedoms. So you also have that hurdle to go after. You may be able to go to a different country and say, hey, look at these outcomes.
You think most of the people inside of the United States have a subjective morality?
I think most of the people in the United States have a subjective morality, because I think everyone has a subjective morality. And I think that their preferences align with the fact that we have certain freedoms, and those freedoms actually, in some cases, can overpower outcomes, like in the gun example. While guns definitely have negative outcomes, I think most people in America would say that we still want to keep this freedom because our moral subjective preference is that it is, but that is the majority of people.
Well, then that would be a better outcome.
I want to really quickly.
Hang on. We're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere.
I'm just going to literally ask one question.
They always bring up guns, and it's like, well, I don't like guns, but I want to keep it around because of my freedom. The difference is that, owning a firearm, like that is a right that is protected by our Constitution, not given to us by the Constitution, protected by the Constitution. And it is for self-defense. It is for in case our government becomes overreaching and we have to defend ourselves against a overreaching government. We could also use it for protection in our homes, out and about. Yes, well, people can use firearms for bad. Taking away them completely would do much more harm than good. Now, if she's arguing about whether to get rid of adult films, adult entertainment, can you make that same argument for that? Can you make an argument for that, saying, well, if we were to take away adult films or just, ban the adult film industry and take away OF, that's going to do much more harm for this country than good. Can she make that same argument? I highly doubt it. What are you guys' thoughts on this so far? Smash that like button if you're enjoying. And if you are enjoying, consider giving my channel a subscribe. I have much more content on my channel very similar to this if you enjoy this type of stuff. Let's continue.
You're fucking up the flow, man. Let me just finish the question.
Fortunately, it's my channel, so I can do whatever the fuck I want. So, Jazmen, I just want to clarify your second point. So you're basically saying that in addition to outcomes, the other metric that we would look at is the popularity of people's preferences, right?
Yes.
Okay.
In a democratic society, that's why we have a democracy, and I think a democracy is good. So yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, keep going, Andrew.
Okay, so anyway, all of these preferences you're pointing to are outcomes. So if you say like, hey, society has determined that even though maybe there's like some negative outcomes, they gain more from owning guns than they don't gain from owning guns, that would still be an outcome. That would be a determination of outcome. So everything that you're really after is a determination of outcome. So it's all outcomes based. So why didn't you start with the moral objection of outcomes? That would have been far better for you to do.
Well, because I was taking critique of you started it with the moral thing. I actually, in my opener, you went through this whole thing about rights and subjectivism. That's why I went there. My opener actually was about the foundation, about freedom, and about outcomes, and then you switched the debate over to here. Now you're complaining
if it's just outcomes based, then we'll move into the outcomes base of this from your purview. So now we understand at least what it is that you value. You really just value outcomes. So
yeah, real quick, because she's here promoting democracy, and if we all put it to a vote and what everyone says, what if we came together and we voted to have the 10 commandments in all school classrooms or something like that? Or what if we just all came together and said, yeah, we want to ban adult films, and we took a vote, a national vote, and majority voted, we don't want no more adult films or OF anymore. I wonder how she would feel about that.
Value outcomes and democracy, yes.
Yeah, okay, but got it. Because you think it leads to the better outcome. Because you think it leads to the better outcome. That's why.
Democracy leads to a better outcome. So yeah, you can take everything back down to that, just like you can take everything back down to preferences and like completely eliminate even free will with this. So I don't know what you're trying to do here. Well, it's not preference because it's not really, because it's not preference based if you actually are valuing outcomes. It's not really just preference based because you think outcomes are what we should be valuing, not Jazmen Jafar's personal preferences. But also the moral preferences of the majority of the people in a democratically free and
because you think that leads to better outcome, Jasmine.
Yes, and everything I do also
then it's outcomes. It's all just evaluation of outcomes.
Framework also, but I want to make sure
it's all just for the
audience that outcomes can also mean, because like the example I gave, having guns in this country may lead to worse objective outcomes in the amount of deaths, etc. But I think, and this part you're right, that the outcome of keeping it matches the moral preference and matches the viewpoints of most people in our democracy. And so therefore that outweighs that negative outcome, which is also a different way of looking at outcomes.
Okay, great. Okay, so now that we've got this established, finally understand what your actual moral framework is, I'm going to ask you this question again, if you don't mind. Do you know who Leonid Radvinsky is?
No.
Okay, he is the founder. He's the owner of OnlyFans. Okay, that's who he is. And he made over $300 million last year. Okay, he managed to pay himself $1 million a day in 2022 via dividends, right? In this particular case, would you consider yourself to be a prostitute and him your pimp?
If we want to really get down to it, sure. I keep 80%, he keeps 20%. Would you consider Patreon or YouTube? Like if Patreon's taking 20% or if Substack's taking 20% of your income, are they your pimp and you're a prostitute? Except for mine is selling sex.
There's no prostitution. So.
Because it's not sex. If you want to say that just because mine is sex,
that's correct.
And Patreon isn't, then sure. Yeah.
Okay, so right. So you're a prostitute. This is your pimp. Can you tell me why that's a better outcome for a person, better utility for a person than being a mother of 3 in a loving home?
I never said it's better, but I would say that it's better to live in a society that grants people freedoms. We have certain civil liberties, and is the determination in what kind of occupation we want to have and what's best suited for us. So for me, I enjoy this. I make a ton of money.
And all rights are all these rights that you are alluding to. All of them have limitations which are placed on them in lieu of responsibility and duty. Correct?
What do you mean?
Well, for an example, if you look at the Second Amendment, right? The fight over the Second Amendment is what responsibility people have with gun ownership. Correct?
True.
Same fight over the First Amendment, right?
Yeah, we also have, yeah, so in
Mhm.
that case, yeah, we have a responsibility with OnlyFans to make sure we don't have like children doing what I'm doing, and there should be certain regulations. I do pay my taxes. I'm a 1099 employee for the IRS.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do think regulations are good.
So if the outcomes here, which you're looking at, if you want to make the claim that the outcome is good for a woman, right, you should be maximizing the outcomes, correct? So how can you
Yeah.
explain how it maximizes utility? The outcomes are better for society. From my worldview, to say no more prostitution, I want to see more women at home with their children raising their families versus being prostitutes on the internet. Can you tell me why it is that your worldview maximizes the outcomes and mine doesn't?
So I can tell you many reasons, one of which is, again, just making the civil liberties argument that a society is better overall when people are allowed the freedoms to live lives that are conducive to their own happiness. But also, if you look at even countries that criminalize this versus countries that don't, even when it comes to in-person prostitution, decrim versus criminalizing, the outcomes tend to be actually better, like in New Zealand for decriminalizing sex work. So we can even get into that if you like.
Great. So in 2012, a study was published by Harvard Law Education, which investigated the effect of legalized prostitution on human trafficking inflows into high-income countries, which we would consider this to be. The research, as it goes through, shows something remarkable, such as the criminalization of prostitution in Sweden resulted in the shrinking of the prostitution market and the decline of human trafficking inflows. Cross-country comparisons of Sweden with Denmark, where prostitution is decriminalized, and Germany expanded legalization of prostitution, and are consistent with the quantitative analysis showing that trafficking inflows decreased with criminalization and increased with legalization. That's a terrible fucking outcome.
No,
Isn't it, Jasmine?
first
That's
of all,
a terrible outcome.
first of all, I have studies where I can pull up two that counter that, especially when we look at decrim versus the Nordic model. This is like my
Then
area.
show 'em
Like
to
I know
me.
this.
Then show 'em
Okay,
to
for
me.
sure. And then also, in the meantime, there's Sesta Fosta. So Sesta Fosta was passed in 2017 or 18 by Trump in order to curb trafficking, human trafficking, taking down back pages by making, basically cutting down the protections afforded by Section 230 of the Communications Act, which would make platforms liable for facilitating prostitution, which took down things like Backpage, which made our job, online sex workers, a lot harder. And platforms liable for facilitating prostitution, which took down things like Backpage, which made our job, online sex workers, a lot harder. And look up the effects of that. All it did was make human trafficking
Well, I don't need
worse.
to look them up. You can just send it to me, but try to understand the entailment here is that at least you're going to have to concede that there's some human trafficking, which is an entailment of prostitution in general, but there is no entailment of human trafficking from being a stay-at-home mom who takes care of her children.
Wait,
why would that
I'm
not
talking
be
about-
why would that not be the outcome that since I want to see that outcome in society and not prostitution, it seems like I have a much better moral leg to stand on than you do from your own worldview.
No, because one, I'll pull up the stats now. We can go through them because I'm going to talk about Sesta Fosta and those effects, and we'll talk about the difference, the decrim, which is why all of the major human rights organizations, all of them, when they looked at all this data, they also are pro decrim. So even though you may find one study here or there, that doesn't negate all the other studies that there is. And two, I would say that even like consensual sex work is different than human trafficking. Me being
They did a
pro-consensual
quantitative they did a quantitative analysis.
Okay.
They took a ton of different studies in order to make these types of comparisons. That's one. But two, the entailment here is that let's just say, even if there was less human trafficking by the legalization of the prostitution than the decriminalization of the prostitution, if I want zero prostitution and there's no entailment of any trafficking by me doing that, how's that not a better outcome for society, Jasmine?
Wait, well, can you repeat your question?
Yes. If there's an entailment of human trafficking, regardless of the criminalization, decriminalized or criminalized, and I want to eliminate it altogether. So regardless of the criminalization or decriminalization, it's just gone, right? We eliminate prostitution altogether. The entailment there is, and we move towards the outcome of having women stay at home and raise their kids. Why isn't that better for society? Why?
It's because you're taking away people's freedoms, the freedom of people like me
the
to do
freedom to be a degenerate,
and
the freedom of you to be a degenerate.
Yeah, Yeah,
And that's all you care about. All you care about is the freedom to be a degenerate. You don't want expanded freedoms and rights so that people can help anybody.
I care about your freedom to own a gun. Is that
no, you don't. You don't give a shit about that. You don't care about my freedom to own a gun. You care about one thing.
One of my papers in law school about how I actually think that the Second Amendment is really important, and I would stand up for your right to have a gun. So how is every single freedom? And
what about,
I believe in free speech.
Well, Jasmine, if you stand up for my right to have a gun, do you stand up for my right to have a gun with no background check?
No.
No. So then shut up. You don't care about my right to own a gun. All you care about,
yes, I do. I
all you care about, all you care about is the
limitation.
No. What you care about,
even though I don't
what
believe in
you
direct
care
threats
about
of
is the duties.
Nope.
What you care about is the duties which are entailed with the ownership of the gun, not the right to own it. The duty and the responsibility is what you care about. Right. Okay. So if that's true, but what we're quibbling about is not whether or not I have a right to own a gun, because you think I don't. You think I have a responsibility when I have a gun, and you'll give me one if I adhere to those responsibilities. That's what you're actually saying.
No, I think you have a right to the freedom of speech, but that has limits. Just like you have the right to own a gun, but there are limits. So I like our free speech doctrine right now. Again, I know you didn't go to law school.
What you're actually attacking.
There are certain things that aren't covered by that right. The First Amendment does not cover direct incitements of violence. It doesn't cover even obscenity.
So in my opening statement, I laid this out, Jasmine. In the opening statement, I laid this out. It's not really a right then. What it is an associative of duties and responsibilities that we're arguing about, which means that there is no real. Stop, Jasmine. There is no right. There is no right. If there was a right. If there was a right, how could you take it away from somebody when they go to prison? Can prisoners have a gun? Can prisoners have a gun?
We need to go one at a time. Let's.
Okay, so let me ask you: Can prisoners have a gun?
I think it would depend, and it depends on the state. And
no, prisoners.
No.
Why can't they have a gun?
Because that's one of the regulations and the restrictions placed on the Second Amendment.
Because there's no actual right if you can take it away.
To have a gun.
So it's an entitlement.
A right doesn't mean.
So it's an entitlement that you can take away, right?
I have a question. If a right has limitations on it, does that make it not a right? Are the only rights ones that have no limitations on them?
Yeah. So I would argue that what a right is actually.
And so what our Supreme Court.
What a right is actually is an entitlement, and that the entitlement is subject to duties and responsibilities. It's not actually a right. And most of the rights
are agreed upon by humans and enforced by society.
Rights are entitlements which people have that you claim that people have, but you can take them away whenever you choose to. It's not really a right.
It's not whenever you choose to, Andrew, because if it was whenever we chose to, you wouldn't be sitting on the internet fighting with me. You would be living the life you want. You have no way right now to stop me.
Unless there's a lockdown. Unless there's a lockdown.
Dollars on OnlyFans.
Yes, you can. The president could literally come out and take away your rights tomorrow via an executive order and declare martial law and suspend all rights.
Yeah, good luck with that. There's a reason that hasn't happened this whole time.
No, it has. It has happened. There has been martial law in the United States. What are you talking about?
I mean, we went through lockdowns with COVID and stuff. How can anyone have lived through that and then argue, oh, the government can't do that, or good luck doing that? Yeah, I think that shows right there. Anyone who had an argument going, well, our government can't be abusive and take away rights. Yeah, I think right there, it shows that absolutely the government can abuse their power.
Okay, so you're saying that basically I don't have a right now, and you can be the person that can judge that, because you saying that if we go through this basically a revolution, because if that happened, especially in recent history over something like OnlyFans, I think you're very deluded on likelihoods of things happening.
Did you have a right to do pornography before it became the law that you could do pornography?
I think I had the right to do pornography before a law came that prohibited me from doing pornography. So laws and rights work if you have them until there's something that tells you that you can't.
Don't cite the Supreme Court and things like this then as an affirmation for why you're correct that you have such a right when you were not allowed to do porn. Just 50 years ago wasn't even legal for you to have the type of society where you could have that kind of pornography. Well, not even nudie magazines, things like that. There's heavy restrictions on all of it. There was times in American history where it was completely outlawed.
Do you know what the obscenity doctrine actually is?
Let me finish. So
again,
There have been doctrines where pornography was completely eradicated from American society. So I don't know what are you saying, though. What I want you to say, one way or the other, is you believe that a woman doing pornography is a basic human right absent law.
Our obscenity doctrine always had a reference to the community standard, which is why when pornography became a thing and people started doing it on the internet, even if simple like places were like, you know, oh, you can't do it in the city. I've went through the whole obscenity doctrine. You can't have a billboard across a movie theater where people are driving because of whatever reason. At the end of the day, based on community standards, which is why the internet, because if you're going to places to find porn, it would fit that community standard. So it wouldn't be a violation. And the reason I brought up the Supreme Court in the first place, no, because I'm responding to, you can't just say this whole thing, ask a question, and when I'm responding to the things before the question.
Yeah, but I'd like you to answer to the actual question.
It's relevant to what you just said. In the last 5 seconds,
how's it relevant?
You told me, why did you bring up the Supreme Court? I'm telling you, because you said rights are only rights if they have no restrictions. And my whole point is we have rights in our Constitution that are then interpreted. Now, you're right. That interpretation could change. That interpretation could change tomorrow.
But did you have a right before they interpreted it as a right is my question.
Yes. Until something usually is outlawed, you have a right.
Okay. So you think
you have to be breaking a law in order.
When it was outlawed, do you still think that you had a basic human right to do pornography even when it was outlawed to do pornography?
I would say with my moral subjective preference, yes, but I didn't have a right in this country to do pornography.
And what made it a right to do that?
My subjective moral framework is
because you wanted it, right? Because you wanted it.
Because just like I don't want you to have guns at all, but I still believe in that principle. My principle is that people should have the freedom to purchase and sell sex.
This woman is going like all over the place. Like she doesn't know what she wants. Like she argues for outcomes. She argues, well, it's the law. Then she argues for democracy. Then it's my preference. See, this is why I like Andrew Wilson, because he just tries to break it down to the roots, like the root of their argument and where it all comes from. Now he believes, see, she's sitting here and she's trying to debate why doing OF is good and should be legal here in the country and why she has the right to do it, blah, blah, blah. He's sitting here pretty much having a debate, trying to debate why her motivations are just out of her selfish degeneracy. That's pretty much what he's trying to get at, which is a similar way that sometimes like I'll try to debate too, which I really like. Because listen, when it gets deep down to it, this is all fluff. Like objectively, subjectively, and objectively. Like, because objectively, encouraging women to stay home and have families is better for society and morally than encouraging women or having women do OF and just making it online adult movies and such. Adult content. This debate would just be one huge waste of time just arguing why it should be this, why it should be that. Because even she can't argue that it's a good thing. She even just said that what he wants isn't objectively morally wrong. She admitted that earlier. So what's her argument? She's trying to cope and justify her degeneracy and her lack of good morals to herself by trying to use the government, by trying to use democracy, by trying to use my freedoms, by trying to use objective reality, trying to use to defer to all these things to justify her lack of morality and her wanting to be a degenerate and to make online adult content. So Andrew Wilson right here is just trying to call it out. Is just trying to get to the root of it. So he'll concede things to her. She'll allow her to appeal to subjective morality or objective morality or my freedom or my democracy and all these things. He'll allow her to defer to that because he wants to expose her and shows that she's full of crap. She's not really doing it for these things, or none of these things are actually really good reasons for it. She just wants to be a degenerate. But what did you think about this debate? How did you think Andrew Wilson did here? How did you think Jazmen Jafar did here? Sound off in the comment section below. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button. And please consider giving my channel a subscribe. You'll be helping me out a lot. And I have a ton of great content that I think you'll like. I recommend you guys watch the full debate. I have a link in the description down below where you could watch it.